to be different, called to be changed. So God, make us different, make us change so we can shine in the darkest places, shine so they can see your face, shine and experience your amazing grace. So let us shine.
Good morning. It's great seeing you, like always. I am going to give you a warning. My shoulder is a little iffy, so I'm not going to move as much today, and my Bible's going to stay where it is. So just fair warning. So if I look like I'm moving weird, that's because I slept wrong last night. I'm getting old already. So this morning, as I was preparing my sermon this week, a character from a sitcom that I quite enjoy, Parks and Recreation, came to mind. Ron Swanson. Is anyone familiar with him? Raise your hand if you're familiar with him. All right, for those of you who are not, he is the director of a Parks and Recreation, government, Indiana, little small town director. He is anti-government. And so his goal as director of this Parks and Recreation is to cut budget and to cut spending of as many governmental resources that he can. He uses his authority to write his own permits to do things he's not legally supposed to do. And he hires people who are inadequate at their jobs, and he promotes the inadequacy. He sounds pretty bad, but he is a lovable character in the show. He's fun to laugh at. He has fun quips, and some of his mentalities are kind of cool. However, I was reminded of him because he's kind of a bad example of using his authority to do things he's not supposed to and undermining the government. Now, I am not saying today that it's great to support every single government thing. But I am going to be reading from 1 Peter 2, and that talks about the government. Because sometimes the Bible talks about the government, even when we don't want to talk about it. I am not like my husband, and I'm not very politically active. I don't keep up on all political news. And so this is coming purely from what the Bible is saying about how we are going to treat our governmental authorities. So, if you would like to turn to 1 Peter 2, we're going to start in verse 13. And like I said, I am reading this, I am giving you a perspective. It might not be your perspective, and that's okay. We don't have to agree on every single little minute detail and interpretation of what the Bible is saying. We just all have to have a basic understanding of how to morally live our life following God. And some people have different views on the minute details. So, 1 Peter 2, verse 13. Submit to every human authority because of the Lord, whether to the emperor as the supreme authority, or to the governors as those sent out by him to punish those who do what is evil and to praise those who do what is good. For it is God's will that you silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good. As God's slaves, live as free people, but don't use your freedom as a way to conceal evil. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, and honor the emperor. Now, quite a few people have some iffiness about this passage because it tells us to submit to every human authority because of the Lord. And you can think back on history, we've had some really bad human authority. So is it telling us to submit to those people? Well, let's look at the Greek word. Hupotasso is the Greek word for submit. It was originally a military term used to help designate the proper soldiers to the proper leader to make sure that they were all in the right place at the right time under the right person. But then it was changed into this voluntary attitude of giving in or submitting to someone in authority. And that's sometimes hard. We don't like to submit to people we don't agree with. We don't like to follow the rules because we naturally are people who have sinned. We naturally are fallen. And so it's hard to say, yeah, I'll follow the rules. Well, here's why we need to follow the rules. In verse 15, it says, For it is God's will that you silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good. I'm sorry for tripping up a little. I need new glasses. They're coming soon, but it's kind of hard to see when the Bible is all the way down here. But for it's God's will that you silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good. So by following these rules, you're doing good. You're listening, you're obeying, you're obedient. And that's showing God through you. In verse 12 that we talked about last week, conduct yourself honorably among the Gentiles, so that in a case where they speak against you, as those who do what is evil, they will be observing your good works, glorifying God on the day of visitation. So that once again ties into that of you're submitting these for the glory of God because you're being honorable. It's like having manners. It's like going around and not pushing people, being kind. A lot of the rules that we have from our government are pretty simple and basic just to protect human life. Like, don't murder. That's a good rule to have that we should follow. Sometimes our government might have rules that we disagree with, or maybe regulations that we don't want to fall under. Well, we should be first and foremost following God's authority, and then our governments. In Romans 13, it has this extreme mindset of submitting to the authority of government, and it has this way of phrasing it that God is above all, that he is the authority. And this is radical for the people of the time in Rome because they were very much of the mindset of their emperor was put in place by their gods. And so Paul coming in and saying, no, everything comes from one God. And here's his morals, here's his rules. That was a very different mindset and a very different lifestyle than that of the pagan gods, who were very pleasure-focused. Where our God is very selfless. He wants you to give his life for him to do good works, to help those around you, to be a light to those around you. And that can be really difficult because, like I said, we don't like submitting to authority. We don't like submitting to those around us. We want to do it our way or the highway. Or sometimes we have to submit and say, oh, it's okay to let those around us who are in authority have a say. I really enjoy verse 17 back in 1 Peter 2. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. And you might wonder, why do I like this? Because it's like honoring the king, honor the emperor, honor the person of authority. Because of the way that this is worded. It starts with honor everyone. That word for honor means like a generic respect. Basic manners. Just having basic manners, smiling at people, basic human kindness. To every individual out there. The next one is love the brotherhood. That means the selfless service to those around you in your church community. This loving them deeply, caring about them, being there for them. So that takes it a step up from just being respectful to them for actually caring about them, caring about how they feel, helping them in the ways that they need help, and actually being there, walking alongside them. And then we have the third step, fear God. That's a reverent respect. It's a love and honor, and also being able to be obedient to him and loving him and praising him. This fear of God is this great respect and this great honor that there's really no words that can really put it into how we can put it in place in our life because it is such an extreme and radical thing. It is such the highest way that we can treat someone, that everything falls under it, of a loving obedience, of worship, of reverence. But it doesn't stop there. It goes back to that honor, that first step, that basic manners, respect. And that's what it says to treat the emperor with. It doesn't say fear him. It doesn't say love him. Honor, that simple respect. That means don't talk badly about them, even when we're annoyed with them. It means follow the rules sometimes. You should follow the rules all the time, but there might be some rules where it's like, I don't need to follow that one. Just because marijuana is legal doesn't mean you need to do marijuana. That's probably a weird example, but it was the first one that I could think of some rules you don't have to do it because you're not forced into doing that lifestyle. So it's just a mindset of honoring and respecting, of being kind and obedient, and having God above it all first. Let's move on to verse 18 and through 20. And this is going to be talking about another touchy subject. It's talking about slaves to masters. Now, when you picture slavery, like myself, you likely picture 19th century slavery in America, where it was very racial. It was taking large amounts of people from Africa, shipping them over in inhumane conditions, enslaving them with absolutely no choice, and giving them absolutely no human value. They were less than pigs. First century slavery was actually different than that. And so when we're reading this, that's not the mindset we should see what these people are under, what the position they're in. They were likely paid because the Roman Empire had a lot of legislation and were very strict with their slavery policies. They wanted people to be paid. It was usually in a situation where a family couldn't pay for their debts or were struggling financially, so they would sell one of their children into slavery, that's not great, but that person would be paid. They would do tasks like they would be an overseer of land where they would help care for and oversee the land. They were treated typically well. Some were obviously not treated well, but for the majority of them, it was expected that a master would treat their slaves well. Also, some were people who were basically apprentices to doctors and other skills where they were being taught and learning, and they would buy their freedom eventually and continue on in that trade. And so it wasn't always this terrible view that we have of it. Yes, it wasn't great, but it wasn't 19th century slavery. So as we read that, keep that in mind. So 1 Peter 2:18, household slaves, submit with all fear to your masters, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the cruel. For it brings favor if mindful of God's will, someone endures grief from suffering unjustly. For what credit is there if you sin and are punished and you endure it? But when you do what is good and suffer, if you endure it, this brings favor with God. So likewise, how we were talking about submitting to authorities for a basic person, it also takes that to slaves as well of, hey, this person is your authority. You should submit to them and obey them, because if you're being punished for disobedience, that's going to look bad on you because you're saying you're a Christian. And Christians are called to obey. They're called to be kind and gentle, to respect those around them, and give a basic human respect and honor to those around them. But if they are going against their master for things that are basic rules of how to do things, how to regulate certain areas, how to serve in that home, then it's kind of their own fault. And they shouldn't be saying, oh, I'm oppressed because of my beliefs. Well, you're the one who messed up. But if it is the mindset of, oh, you are obeying, you are doing well, and you're still getting oppressed, then take glory in that. Because God is with you, and you are suffering for him, and not because of your own mistakes. You are living a life of honor and respect. You are living a life for God, walking in his ways. So take honor in that. And that's a hard mindset to have, of saying it's okay to be persecuted. That kind of sucks to say. But Paul was imprisoned in his own home, under house arrest for years. Peter was persecuted as well. There are a lot of martyrs in our Christian church history, because it's hard to be a Christian sometimes in different generations. Now, in our generation, in our place, that's not what our life looks like. But does that mean we shouldn't submit to people? We shouldn't give them honor? We shouldn't listen to authority? Absolutely not. We should still have the same mindset of those who are being persecuted. In James 1, verse 12, it says, "A man who endures trials is blessed, because when he passes the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him." So that has the same mindset of, blessed is him who endures trials for the Lord, not because of your own human mistakes, but because of God and your faith. Now, kind of switching gears, I'm going to skip the next couple verses because I don't want to go over, and I'm trying to get through all of the submission content of 1 Peter. So we're going to go into 1 Peter 3. Verses 21 to 25 are really good. I would suggest you read them when you get home. They give some context of why we should submit, because Christ submitted. It kind of goes into how he didn't talk back when he was being beaten. He took our sins onto the cross, and that he calls us when we have gone astray, and that we should continue to submit in those times. So, 1 Peter 3, verse 1. We're going to read a big chunk here, so we're going to read 1 through 7. In the same way as we just talked about of submitting to the government and submitting to masters, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that even if some disobey the Christian message, they may be won over without a message, but by the way the wives live. When they observe your pure, reverent lives, your beauty should not consist of outward things like elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold ornaments or fine clothes. Instead, it should consist of what is inside the heart, and with the imperishable quality of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is very valuable in God's eyes. For in the past, the holy women who put their hope in God also beautified themselves in this way, submitting to their own husbands. Just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, you have become her children when you do what is good and are not frightened by anything alarming. Husbands, in the same way, live with your wives with an understanding of their weaker nature, yet showing them honor as co-heirs of the grace of life, so that your prayers will be not hindered. So this is kind of radical, once again, in our society, because in our day and age, that is not what is being talked about in the world. And when looking at this, some may use it as a way to say women should only be this submissive person at home, not working, caring for their children, when in reality, is that really what it's talking about here? And does it end at women? People usually ignore the husband part. There are two sides of this. Women, you're submitting. You're being kind. You're being reverent. You're giving honor to your spouse. But men, remember that they're your co-heirs. Does anyone know what co-heir means? That means both of you are equally going to inherit the kingdom. Both of you, in the same way, have grace. Both of you, in the same way, are viewed by God. In Galatians 3:28-29, it says that through Christ, there is neither Jew nor Gentile, male nor female, and that we are all one. There is no differences. But sometimes, for women, it's hard to submit to your husband. Husbands, it might be hard to listen to your wife's advice too. And so we must be reminded of that, you need to work together. You need to honor each other. You need to lift each other up. You need to listen to each other's advice. Cameron and I have very different skills at different areas. He is very skilled in being mindful of what's going on in the world. I'm not. I am more skilled in personal care for people, interactions with people. So we have very different skills, but together it's oh yeah, you might not want to say that because someone might politically disagree with you greatly. And it's never thought of it that way. Didn't know that was a political topic. Sorry, man. And so being able to interact with Cameron in that way, we're able to learn and grow and work together to be kind and respectful to those around us, to be able to submit to our government, to be able to submit to those in authority over us, to be able to honor everyone. We have to work together as a team, as a unit, as helpers. I would also like to note this one final thing. Some people point out to that weaker nature in verse 7. This literally means that their body is weaker. It's not that their spirituality is weaker. It's not that their personality, their intelligence. In the Greek, it's literally talking about their bodies. Because it is typical for men to be stronger. It was typical for men to be the fighters, and to women not. Now, I have met a lot of very strong women that could probably beat up any man they come across. But this is saying the atypical woman is usually weaker in stature than the man. This is not at all making women inferior in intelligence or in spirituality. I wanted to make that very clear for all of you. Moving on. This is our last section, so hang in there. I think I'm going long. I can't really see the clock. Like I said, I need new glasses. So this last section is basically why we are submitting to all of this. Why Peter was talking about submitting to everyone, the government, the masters, spouse. He says this, "Now finally all of you should be like-minded and sympathetic, should love believers and be compassionate and humble, not paying back evil for evil or insults for insults, but on the contrary, giving a blessing, since you were called for this, so that you can inherit a blessing. For the one who wants to love life and to see good days must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. And he must turn away from evil and do what is good. He must seek peace and pursue it, because the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their requests, but the face of the Lord is against those who do what is evil." This is saying because you are God's, because you are seeking a life of love, a life of doing good, seeking a life of humility and compassion, seeking a life to not do evil to others, that is why Peter talks about submission, of honor and respect, a basic human, I lost the word. A basic thing that we should do to all humans is respecting them, having manners towards them, being kind to them, speaking nicely, not repaying back evil for evil. That's what submission is. That's why Peter talks about it. I know it's tough to read. I know it's hard to read. There are a lot of different translations out there. As I was doing research, I had 10 commentaries, and it was there are so many ways you can view this. So as I was looking at the Greek and learning more about it, I was okay, I think this is what I can present to you today. But be like the Bereans and do your own research about this. Fact check it. Come to your own conclusions of what God is telling you that this scripture is saying. I encourage you to read it on your own time. Think about it. Process it. Everyone will come to different results, and that's okay. But take this one thing. Have honor to those around you. Love life and love our God. And when we do that, our life will show that. The way that we live will reflect that. The way that we respect those around us will reflect that love and that honor and fear that we have for God. I'll pray as the band comes back up to sing our final song. Dear God, thank you for your words. Sometimes they're hard and they're difficult. They say things that in our day and age we might not fully understand or agree with, but you are a good God through and through. You have rules for us that we should follow, and even when we don't want to, they're still good. We praise you each and every day for your words, and allow us to understand them and to know them. And as we understand them, to get to know you more. Allow us to seek your way and your will, and to live a life reflectant of your love and your compassion and your mercy. Amen.
So let us shine in a world that needs your light, in a world that needs your love, in a world whose only hope is from above. Let us shine.